We are live. The doctors are in. So here I am, Dr. Joanne Sotelo. I'm with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Erin Hurley. And we are doing our Friday broadcast to help you all with whatever you've been struggling with. And we try to think of things that would be useful. And one of the things that came up in just our conversation is thinking the weather, right? And all those snowstorms and depending on where you are in, I don't know, in Earth, right? You could be handling different things, right? I'm from Puerto Rico. Usually we don't worry about this until later in the fall when it starts hurricane season. But living in almost anywhere else in the US, we're struggling with just changes in weather and snowstorms. So I am in Texas, so I'm not allowed to complain of the low weather, but Erin, tell me, your weather is quite
Yeah,
different. Like, what are you hearing and what are you hearing
yeah,
people struggling with already?
yeah. So I know here in the Northwest, we have occasional snow and ice storms, and so we are gearing up for snow starting later today, and then leading to freezing rain and sleet and ice. And it doesn't look like the temperatures are going to get above freezing until maybe Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And so, just thinking of logistics with all of those things. I have a friend in the hospital, so I'm going to race up there to go visit today because I might not see them for 5 more days. And then when I opened up my phone this morning to look at the weather in the news app, it just said basically most of the US is having snow and ice storms. There's been tornadoes recently. So just adds one more layer. And I know with this time of year in medicine, oftentimes there's more illnesses and infectious illnesses, more hospitalizations. And so I would wonder, what are your thoughts, Joanne, when you've already got maybe some stress going on in your life? And now there's one more thing, like the weather and maybe unexpected. Any thoughts on things that we can do to better manage when we've got kind of stress added upon stress?
Yes, and I was thinking about it just a couple of years ago as a psychiatrist. I was interviewed in the local news because, again, we're in Texas, so we're not prepared for that. But there was a snowstorm and everything froze, and we were out of electricity and water for almost a week, and
Mhm.
people couldn't get out of their houses. And people struggled a lot, right? Like that's kind of what I talked about in like from a psychiatric standpoint of, and then almost from a traumatic standpoint, right? And even though it doesn't sound, maybe to other people it doesn't sound like that bad, but it's very unique and it's very personal. And something that
Mhm.
we talk a lot is, right, like we can talk about what to do after the fact, but let's talk about prevention and awareness and what we
Mhm.
can do
Mhm.
ahead of time. And what I've noticed too, and you've probably noticed something similar with the people that you see and that you coach, is the more mental and emotional resources we have ahead of time, the better we deal with in terms of difficult situations. So it's not to say that, like I said, like I don't say it's not that you're going to be all peace and love forever and ever, whenever, right? Like it's very appropriate and needed to have an emotional reaction, right? Like that's how we know that we have to take
Mhm.
action, but that it doesn't go from, right, like something happens and then it's complete overwhelm, freak out, because then it's a different part of your brain that will be working. So you're kind of the part of your brain that's smart and makes decisions and thinks about resources will not be working as well. So, right, like as
Mhm.
kind of a straightforward advice ahead of time is to start practicing how to manage your thinking, right? Like how to be curious about
Mhm.
what you're thinking, and then identifying what are the emotions that you have on a regular basis and what's your stress reaction, right? Like I know that I'm
Mhm.
in the worrying, my brain worries, so I know that if I'm not feeling well, I'm going to feel anxious. But if I'm feeling anxious, I'm not going to have all the resources, the mental and emotional resources that I have. So I
Mhm.
know I use my emotion because it'll happen. I use it as a kind of like as a trigger of, oh, something's happening. What's going through my mind, right? So this is something that
Mhm.
you can practice
Like
ahead of time.
like a
What?
pause to check in, like
Yeah,
that's your reminder. So I'm feeling worry, and our brains are telling us something. It's programmed for a reason, and you're then pausing instead of reacting without thinking. You sounds like you're taking a pause and going, "Oh, what is this telling me?" And then what are the resources I know I need to tap into in order to better manage so you can get your executive functioning brain working again.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Oh yes, yes, perfect. So I'm curious what like how do and especially on a personal note, right? If you having to deal with probably worse weather and what you've
Yeah.
noticed throughout your years of you doing your own coaching and personal development of
Mhm.
maybe how you dealt with, if we talk about a snowstorm to use that as an example,
Yeah.
maybe 5 years ago versus what you see doing different now, and that
Yeah.
might be
Yeah.
super helpful.
Well, the prevention part, so number 1, I meditate now, which is different, and so I can go about things in a more calm manner and tap into my executive brain functioning more often, and then learning from lessons. So, I don't know how many years it's been, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we had, freezing weather, and we were new in our house and we didn't know about the valve to turn off for the water pipes. So we had the water pipes burst not once but twice over our garage and totally flooded our garage. Luckily didn't ruin anything, that we had photos and things in there. Anyway, so now last night I said to my husband, because he is a firefighter, he leaves for work, who knows when he'll get back. It's going to be at least a day or two. But okay, did we turn off the valve in the top of the attic? Are the hoses unscrewed? Like, what are all the preventive things we need to do to make sure he got the generator set up? So learning from past mistakes, because we've had ice storms here where people were out of power for a week or two at a time. So just kind of learning, okay, so adding to the list of things that we do, and also then dividing and conquering. So my husband says, well, I did these 3 things. I didn't get to the hoses. So I said, okay, no problem. Woke up my son this morning and I said, hey, this morning before it freezes, I need you to get the hoses. So that delegating is always helpful when you can. So you're not managing all. A lot of times as physicians or healthcare providers, we're like, oh, I can't trust anybody else to do it, or I'm just going to do it myself. But when we can delegate, my role is being divided up amongst my family. I'm not owning everything. And then we're double checking each other to make sure that we're getting it all done. So we prevent as many problems as we can.
Yes, and thank you for saying that, right? Because when we're talking, when we talk a lot to other healthcare professionals, especially physicians and female physicians, from a
Mhm.
good place and from our hearts, we tend to be problem fixers and we want to do it all and take care of everyone, right? It's a beautiful thing that we want to take care of everyone, but especially in these difficult situations, we have to remind ourselves we're going to do better as a team. And yes, you can
Mhm.
maybe be the leader and have a little bit more control, but have that system. And I love, right, like kind of the formula that you guys have ahead of time. So that's another thing to think of in this particular situation. What's the formula? What are the concrete things that we
Mhm.
can do ahead of time? Because it's not just concretely you'll be more prepared, but your brain will be calmer, right? Like it's a different way
Yeah.
to keep our central nervous system under control, right? Again, I think of the hurricanes in Puerto Rico. So it's like everyone knows, as soon as it's announced, you go, we might exaggerate a little bit, but you go to the supermarket, right? It's like any other
Got all the things. Yep.
emergency, and you get your things and you cover up your windows and you make sure that
Yeah.
you
So
have
you have a
batteries.
routine. Yeah.
Exactly. Those things are concrete, right? So it's not just, like you hear talk of just minding your thoughts. So yes, but we have to be smart in keeping the tools, but then also understanding that's part of the plan. And you have to be in a good place to say, like your husband, right? Like that conversation with your husband of, okay, what are the 1, 2, 3s that we need to follow? Okay, check. And then we calm our central nervous system down, right? So we
Yeah.
have more mental and emotional resources to do
Yeah.
the other
I
things that
think the
we're
other thing too is just a reminder that when we're in the moment and it's getting all crazy, I made sure I meditated this morning. My 2 meditations, got up a little extra early to make sure, because when do we need those self-care things? We need to remember to do those when we have the stressful times, because they're going to help carry us through and keep that momentum. So just a reminder, if you have little things, or maybe you can't, maybe I couldn't have meditated for 20 minutes, maybe I do it for 3, so just remembering not to let all our self-care tools go out the window.
Yeah,
So,
it
yeah.
reminds me of what our mentor Brendan Busher always says, like, when is the best time to get the map? Right? I cannot remember exact words, but it's like
Oh,
before you get to
the
the
best
forest,
time
right?
to have the map is before you enter the forest. Yep.
Exactly, right.
So,
So this is the same thing. And when we're about to enter that situation, that's so important, because sometimes we get hooked on that formula. And it's so good of what you're saying of having a plan B, right? Like, I love my meditations, but sometimes all I have time is to do deep breathing, right? So
mhm.
also, then that's another really good tool, right? Like, so we talked about having a positive mind frame and trying to stay calm. We talked about having a plan, a concrete plan. We talked about delegating, and the general thing there too is having that support and the connection, knowing that you're not going to do that alone, right? And then having some mindfulness tips, right? Like, the whatever helps you. I love journaling, so that's kind of my grounding thing. And sometimes when I'm like this, I just know I just need to write 2 things that I'm grateful for. Like you're saying, okay, yours is meditating, then let me just do a 2-minute meditation, or like the deep breathings, and to just give you the concrete. If you There's all kinds of breathing techniques, but if you extend your exhale, that's really good to activate the part of our nervous system that calms us down, and the intention that comes with it, right? Like, we talk about that every time, of having the intention, and then to know you're not alone, right? And to seek support as needed. So, right, that those
Yeah,
are some good
asking for
tools.
help. Yes,
Yes.
asking for help is so hard. I think that's so important. Well, maybe we can talk more about some of those things next week. And it's been great seeing you this morning, Joanne, and talking about those tips we can do for when stress comes and more stress comes. There are ways that we can get through it. And I think we're always better doing it together.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And to leave you all with something, right? So think of what is your kind of your stress response, and then think of what's one thing that you can do that you believe will get you ready in case anything difficult comes up. And if you want to share, please do so here in the comments. It's a good way to then create that social learning, so that we all have ideas. And then tune in and let us know what you would want to hear from us. We'll be here next week. Thank you.
Yeah, we heard from Shanley. That was awesome last week. Some ideas. So we'll have to take those down, and we'll see you next week. Same time. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.